In the jungles of Cambodia lies the ruins of what was once the largest city in the world, a sprawling metropolis of over 1 million people that vanished so completely from history that it became legend. This was Angkor, the magnificent capital of the Khmer Empire, home to the famous Angkor Wat temple and dozens of other architectural marvels that rival anything built by ancient civilizations. Welcome back to Beneath the Ruins. Today, we're investigating one of history's most spectacular urban collapses, the mysterious destruction of Angkor, a city so vast and sophisticated that when it thrived, it was home to more people than any settlement on Earth. What could cause a million-person metropolis to simply disappear into the jungle? The answer reveals a cautionary tale about the limits of human ambition and engineering. For over 600 years, from the 9th to the 15th centuries, Angkor was the beating heart of Southeast Asia's greatest empire. The Khmer controlled territories stretching from Vietnam to Myanmar, commanded vast armies, and built the most sophisticated water management system in the ancient world. Their capital city covered over 1,000 square miles, larger than modern Los Angeles, and supported a population that wouldn't be matched by any city until the Industrial Revolution. But then, in the 15th century, something catastrophic happened. The million-person metropolis was gradually abandoned, its temples consumed by jungle growth, and its sophisticated civilization forgotten by the outside world. When French explorer Henri Mouhot rediscovered Angkor in 1860, local villagers insisted the massive stone temples had been built by gods, not humans, because they couldn't believe their ancestors possessed such advanced engineering skills. To understand what destroyed Angkor, we first need to appreciate what made it so extraordinary. The city wasn't just large, it was a masterpiece of urban planning that solved problems modern cities still struggle with. The Khmer engineers created an intricate network of canals, reservoirs, and water temples that captured monsoon rains, stored them through dry seasons, and distributed water to support over 1 million people in one of the world's most challenging climates. The scale of their hydraulic engineering was breathtaking. The West Barre Reservoir alone covered 42 square miles and could hold 1.7 billion gallons of water. A network of canals totaling over 600 miles in length connected dozens of massive reservoirs, creating what was essentially a giant water computer that regulated flow, prevented flooding, and enabled year-round agriculture in a region of extreme seasonal variation. This wasn't just functional engineering, it was sacred engineering. The Khmer believed their king was a god king, a Devaraja, whose divine power was manifested through the control of water. The elaborate temple complexes weren't just religious centers. They were integral parts of the hydraulic system, with sacred pools and channels that connected the spiritual and practical aspects of water management. Angkor Wat itself, the largest religious monument ever built, was designed as a representation of Mount Meru, the cosmic center of the Hindu universe. But it was also a functional part of the water system, with precisely calculated proportions that helped regulate water flow throughout the city. The temple wasn't just a monument to the gods, it was a monument to human mastery over the natural environment. For centuries, this system worked flawlessly. The Khmer capital supported a population density that rivals modern cities, fed through intensive rice agriculture that produced multiple crops per year. Trade goods flowed through Angkor from across Southeast Asia. The city's wealth funded massive construction projects that employed tens of thousands of workers and created architectural marvels that still inspire awe today. But the very system that made Angkor great also made it vulnerable. The city's 1 million inhabitants depended entirely on the hydraulic infrastructure functioning perfectly. There was no backup plan, no alternative water source, no way to survive if the elaborate engineering failed. And around 1400 AD, that's exactly what happened. Recent archaeological research has revealed that Angkor's collapse wasn't caused by a single catastrophe, but by a cascade of interconnected failures that turned the city's greatest strength into its fatal weakness. The trouble began with climate change. Tree ring data and lake sediment cores show that the 14th and 15th centuries brought unprecedented weather extremes to Southeast Asia. The region was hit by severe droughts followed by catastrophic floods that overwhelmed even Angkor's sophisticated water management system. During drought periods, the massive reservoirs that normally stored water through dry seasons began to run low. Rice production declined, and the city struggled to feed its enormous population. But then, when the rains did come, they came as devastating floods that the overtaxed system couldn't handle. The canals that were designed to carry controlled flows became torrents that carved new channels and destroyed carefully maintained infrastructure. Reservoirs designed for gradual release were overwhelmed and burst their banks. The precision-engineered water system that had sustained 1 million people for centuries began to break down under extreme conditions it was never designed to handle. But climate stress alone didn't destroy Angkor. The city's problems were compounded by what archaeologists call infrastructure degradation. After 400 years of continuous operation, the massive hydraulic system required constant maintenance to function properly. Canals needed dredging to prevent silting. Reservoir walls needed repair to prevent leaks. The complex network of channels required careful calibration to maintain proper flow rates. This maintenance required enormous human resources and careful coordination across the entire system. As climate stress reduced agricultural productivity and trade disruption cut into the city's wealth, the Khmer found it increasingly difficult to maintain their infrastructure at the level required for the system to function. Archaeological evidence shows that by the late 14th century, many of Angkor's canals were becoming clogged with sediment. Reservoirs were leaking and not being properly repaired. The precision that had made the system work was gradually degrading, making the entire network less resilient to climate stress. At the same time, Angkor faced increasing military pressure from neighboring kingdoms. The Thai kingdom of Ayutthaya was expanding eastward, threatening Khmer territories and disrupting trade routes. The city found itself having to divert resources from infrastructure maintenance to military defense, further weakening the systems that kept the capital functioning. Political instability within the Khmer Empire made matters worse. As environmental and military pressures mounted, different factions within the royal court began competing for power. The divine authority of the god kings was questioned as their ability to control the waters, their primary source of legitimacy, became increasingly unreliable. The final blow came in the form of what researchers call network collapse. As parts of the water system failed, the remaining parts were put under increased stress. A canal failure in one area would redirect water flow, potentially causing failures elsewhere. A reservoir breach could flood downstream infrastructure, causing cascade effects throughout the system. Unlike modern cities with redundant infrastructure systems, Angkor's water network was highly interconnected and interdependent. When one part failed, it put stress on other parts, creating a domino effect that could rapidly spread throughout the entire system. By the early 15th century, large sections of Angkor were becoming uninhabitable. Areas that had been fertile agricultural land for centuries turned into swamps or drought-stricken wastelands as the water system broke down. The population that had once reached over 1 million began to migrate away from the failing capital. The final abandonment of Angkor wasn't a sudden evacuation. It was a gradual exodus that took place over several decades. Different neighborhoods were abandoned at different times as infrastructure failures made them uninhabitable. The royal court itself eventually moved to Phnom Penh, closer to the Mekong River and less dependent on the failing hydraulic infrastructure. By 1500 AD, the great city was largely empty. The temples remained, their stone construction allowing them to survive even as the wooden palaces and houses of the population disappeared. But the 1 million people were gone, scattered across Southeast Asia or absorbed into other communities. Nature quickly began to reclaim the abandoned city. Without constant human maintenance, the jungle grew over the ruins with shocking speed. Within a few generations, trees were growing through temple walls and vines were covering ancient carvings. The sophisticated water system, deprived of human management, became a series of stagnant pools and overgrown channels. The lessons of Angkor's collapse are sobering for our modern world. Here was a civilization that represented the pinnacle of hydraulic engineering. that had successfully managed complex urban systems for over 400 years, that controlled vast territories and enormous populations. Yet when multiple stresses converged, climate change, infrastructure degradation, military pressure, and political instability, the entire system collapsed with shocking speed. Modern cities face similar challenges. Climate change is bringing more extreme weather events that test infrastructure designed for historical conditions. Aging water, power, and transportation systems require massive investments to maintain functionality. Political and economic pressures can interfere with the long-term planning needed for complex urban systems. The story of Angkor shows us that even the most sophisticated civilizations are vulnerable when environmental stress, infrastructure failure, and social instability converge. The Khmer Empire's million-person capital disappeared not because of conquest or natural disaster, but because the complex systems that made urban life possible became too difficult to maintain under stress. Perhaps most importantly, Angkor's collapse reminds us that human mastery over the environment is always conditional and temporary. The Khmer thought they had conquered nature through engineering, but nature ultimately reclaimed their greatest achievement. As we face our own environmental challenges, the ruins in the Cambodian jungle stand as both inspiration and warning about the limits of human ambition. What do you think we can learn from Angkor's collapse? Are modern cities better prepared to handle the kind of system failures that destroyed the Khmer capital? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more stories of how ancient civilizations face their greatest challenges.